Silence can be terrifying, not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that follows desperate prayers, long nights, and honest questions. You beg for a sign, a shift, a whisper from heaven, and instead you're met with stillness, deafening, aching stillness. But silence does not mean absence, and delay does not mean denial. What if the silence isn't rejection, but refinement? What if God's quiet is the space where He does His deepest work? Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, locked in a prison. Years passed in what seemed like silence. David was anointed king but spent much of his youth hiding in caves. Even Jesus in Gethsemane cried out with no voice returning from the clouds. Were they abandoned? Number they were being developed. Heaven's silence is not neglect, it is strategy. The world conditions us to think if it isn't instant, it's invalid. That if we can't see movement, nothing is happening. But that's a shallow view of a deep process. Some things must grow in hiddenness before they're revealed in glory. God does His finest work in the dark, when no one is clapping and no one sees. If you feel forgotten, I want you to hear this. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. You're not being delayed, you're being developed. This video is a message for every man who's been faithful but unheard, for those in the valley between promise and fulfillment, for those who are trying to hold the vision while carrying the silence. Over the next 4 chapters, we'll go deep. We'll break down what it really means when God goes quiet. We'll pull strength from history, clarity from scripture, and power from personal experience. This isn't just a motivational message, it's a roadmap through the silence. And by the end of it, you'll understand God is always working, even when you hear nothing, especially then. So listen closely, like this video, share it with a brother who's in his silent season, subscribe so you never miss the wisdom you were born to walk in, and drop a comment at the end of each chapter to lock in what speaks to your soul. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The wilderness is not a wasteland. There is a sacred space between the promise and the fulfillment, a place no one prays to be, yet every great man has walked through it. The Bible calls it the wilderness, history calls it exile, and in modern times we call it being stuck, overlooked, or delayed. But what if the wilderness isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, not because he failed, but because he was being forged. He had grown up in Pharaoh's palace, trained in Egyptian power, but before he could lead God's people to freedom, he had to be stripped of Egypt's pride and rebuilt with heaven's patience. The wilderness didn't disqualify him, it refined him. God could have delivered the Israelites from Egypt and dropped them straight into the promised land, but He didn't. Why? Because the journey wasn't just about arrival, it was about becoming. God is more interested in who you're becoming than how fast you're getting there. And that's why the wilderness exists. It's the uncomfortable space where men are forced to confront themselves. The noise of the world dies down, and in the silence, your true self begins to speak. In the wilderness, you find out what you really believe. You find out if you trust God when He's not handing you miracles, when doors aren't opening, when the path is unclear and the pressure is real. The wilderness doesn't expose your weakness to destroy you, it exposes your heart to develop you. The silence of God in this space isn't rejection, it's restraint. He's watching how you move without applause, how you handle responsibility without recognition, how you keep your faith when your prayers seem to echo off the walls. And here's the truth, most people quit in the wilderness. They confuse silence for abandonment. They believe delay means denial. But if you're in that space right now, I need you to know this is not the end of your story. This is the chapter where strength is built. The wilderness is sacred ground. Every great leader in history, biblical or otherwise, has spent time in the shadows before stepping into the spotlight. David was hunted like a criminal before he ever wore a crown. He knew what it meant to be alone, misunderstood, and betrayed. But he also knew that in those caves, in that silence, he was being made into a man after God's own heart. The wilderness breaks you, but it also builds you. It humbles you, but it also heals you. God doesn't allow silence to harm you. He allows it to sharpen you. He hides you because he loves you. He delays the blessing so you don't destroy it with an unprepared character. He lets you sit in the silence so you can grow into the man who won't break when the pressure hits. You don't plant a seed and expect it to bloom the next day. You let it die in the soil. You water it, wait for it, and trust the process. That's what the wilderness is. Your soul being rooted in the soil of silence, preparing for a harvest greater than you imagined. So if you feel lost, understand this. The wilderness is not a sign that God is done with you. It's the proof that he's just getting started. The longer the development, the greater the destiny. You may be hidden, but you're not forgotten. You may feel delayed, but you are being built. You may hear nothing from God, but he is working every second, chiseling your character, strengthening your spirit, and aligning your future. This is the season to stop asking, why am I here? And start declaring, there's something here I need to become. The wilderness is not a wasteland. It is a workshop. It is not where you lose yourself. It is where God restores the version of you the world tried to break. So walk through it with your head up. You're not failing. You're forming. This season will not last forever, but what you build in it can last a lifetime. Drop a comment below. I'm being prepared, not punished. Chapter 2. The silence that strengthens. There's a kind of silence that doesn't break you. It builds you. Not the silence that isolates you from the world, but the silence that forces you to wrestle with your inner world. The kind that empties your hands so God can fill your spirit. In the quiet, you start to hear the truth. And the truth is, we often want noise, not because it's good for us, but because it distracts us. We run to distractions when God stops speaking. We scroll more, we binge more, we numb more. Why? Because silence demands stillness, and stillness forces us to listen to the thoughts we've buried under busyness. But silence is not God's punishment. It's his invitation, an invitation to grow in ways that noise could never allow. The story of Elijah in 1 Kings 19 is one of the clearest examples of this. Elijah is exhausted, broken, and afraid. He hides in a cave, asking God to end his life. And when God finally responds, he doesn't come in the earthquake, the wind, or the fire. He comes in a still, small voice. Not power, not spectacle, but stillness. Why? Because God wanted to shift Elijah's strength from what was external to what was eternal. You see, God doesn't strengthen men by always answering them. He strengthens them by developing them. And development often requires silence. Just like muscles are built in the strain, not the ease, faith is built in the silence, not in the shouting. The man who can endure silence without losing his mind is a man who cannot be shaken when the storms come. God uses silence to stretch your roots. When you can't see the results, he's forcing you to anchor in faith. When you don't feel his presence, he's training you to walk by belief, not by feeling. And that, my brother, is where true strength begins. You don't grow when God does what you want. You grow when you trust him when he doesn't. Let that sink in. There are moments when God goes quiet, not because he's mad, but because he's building something in you that requires faith at full volume. He wants you to learn to move forward with no confirmation, to obey without validation, and to lead without applause. Silence is spiritual resistance training. And just like a soldier doesn't become battle-ready in comfort, a man of God doesn't become spiritually strong in certainty. He becomes strong in uncertainty. That's why he lets you wait. That's why he lets you wonder. It's not to destroy you, it's to deepen you. Think about Jesus. Before his public ministry began, he spent 40 days in the wilderness alone. No crowd, no disciples, no voice from heaven except for the one that had already been spoken at his baptism. That silence was not abandonment, it was preparation. And when the enemy came to tempt him, Jesus didn't panic. He had been fortified in the silence. Silence teaches you how to carry the sword of truth when your emotions scream lies. It trains you to hear the voice of God, not in the chaos, but in the calm. It teaches you how to stand when everything around you feels uncertain. And most of all, it gives you the ability to encourage yourself when no one else is speaking life into you. Because one day, you'll have to lead others through storms. You'll have to be the calm when others are panicking. You'll have to be the voice of stability when everything feels unstable. And God is preparing you for that right now in the silence. The problem is, we often misread silence. We think God's quiet means He's left the room, but God's silence is not His absence, it's His signal. A signal to dig deeper, to press further, to trust harder. If He told you everything, faith wouldn't be necessary. If He showed you the ending, obedience would be easy. But it's the man who can walk without a map, who becomes the one others follow when the path disappears. In the silence, God is showing you the difference between momentary confidence and eternal conviction. He's asking, will you still believe me when I'm not speaking? Will you still follow me when I'm not answering? Will you still love me when you don't understand me? If the answer is yes, then silence is no longer your enemy. It becomes your training ground, so don't run from it, don't resent it, don't numb it, embrace it, sit in the silence, breathe in the quiet, let it stretch you, strengthen you, and stabilize you. Because when God is silent, He's still working. And when He's working in silence, He's building something in you that the noise of this world could never produce. Drop a comment below. The silence is shaping me. Chapter 3. Trusting the invisible hand. There's a moment in every man's life when everything he sees contradicts everything he believes. When doors close, when opportunities slip away, when prayers return with no answer. And in that moment, you're faced with a decision. Will you trust what you feel, or will you trust what you know? This is where real faith begins, not when the miracles are visible, but when the hand of God is invisible. We often say we trust God, but most of us trust results. We trust answered prayers. We trust open doors. We trust what we can measure. But when God goes silent, all of that is stripped away, and that's when the real work of trust begins. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. For years, it seemed like God had completely abandoned him. No signs, no visions, no angelic messages, just silence, painful, prolonged silence. And yet God was moving the whole time. Every betrayal led to positioning. Every loss made space for elevation. Every delay carved the path toward destiny. Joseph had to trust an invisible hand because divine purpose often hides behind human pain. God doesn't always speak because He's trying to teach you how to see. Not with your eyes, but with your spirit. You won't always see the breakthrough, you won't always feel the momentum, but when you keep walking anyway, that's called spiritual maturity, and that kind of trust can't be taught in comfort. It's born in the fire of the unknown. Too many men walk away from their destiny because they misunderstood silence. They thought God's lack of response meant He'd changed His mind. But listen carefully, God's promises are not based on how loud He is. They are based on how faithful He is, and He never stops working. Isaiah 64:4 says, God works for those who wait for Him, not those who rush, not those who panic, not those who force open doors. He works for those who wait. Why? Because waiting is faith in motion. It's saying, God, even when I don't see your hand, I trust your heart. Imagine a man on a battlefield. His commander gives him one instruction: hold the line. Hours pass, then days. No backup, no voice, just silence. But the man stays in position. Why? Because he trusts the one who gave the order. That's what trusting God looks like in silence. You stay in position, even when you hear nothing, because you know He never makes a promise He doesn't intend to keep. There is no wasted obedience. Every step you take in silence is building something unseen. Every time you resist the urge to quit, heaven takes note. Every time you move without signs, you're writing a legacy of unshakable faith. Don't be fooled by how it looks right now. Esther was hidden before she became queen. David was hiding in caves before he ruled Israel. Jesus lived in obscurity for 30 years before his public ministry began. The greatest transformations often happen behind the curtain, not on the stage, but in the shadows. When God goes silent, he's shifting pieces you can't even see yet, aligning people, closing doors to protect you, delaying outcomes to strengthen you. You think it's rejection, but it's redirection. You think he's forgotten you, but he's actually preparing others to receive what he's placed inside you. And here's the deeper truth. The silence is not about your comfort. It's about your calling. God loves you too much to answer prayers that would shrink your soul. He loves you too much to open doors that your character isn't ready for. So he waits. He lets you grow. He lets your roots go deep. And in that waiting, he's not just preparing the promise, he's preparing you. This is why trust is everything. Not trust in a specific outcome, but trust in the nature of God himself. Trust that he's good, that he's wise, that he's intentional, that even in the silence, his hand has not let go of your life. It's easy to trust when you understand, but true trust is built when understanding is gone, and obedience is all you have left. So don't rush the process. Don't resent the silence. Instead, say this: I may not see the full picture, but I trust the artist. Say, I may not hear the instructions right now, but I trust the commander. Say, I may feel alone, but I trust the one who promised he'd never leave. That's what men of faith do. They trust the invisible hand. They stay planted in the unseen, and they keep walking, even through the quiet, because they know God is still working. Drop a comment below. I trust the invisible hand. Chapter 4. When silence becomes breakthrough. There's a moment when the silence shifts, when the waiting transforms into something bigger than you ever expected. It's that moment when you realize silence wasn't denial, it was development. Breakthrough doesn't come when you get what you wanted. It comes when you become who you were meant to be. The silence you've endured, the pain you've pushed through, the lessons you've learned, these are the very things that position you for the breakthrough. Think about the seasons of growth in nature. A seed doesn't break through the surface immediately. It spends time buried, unseen, unknown to anyone, until the right moment. And when it does emerge, it's not just a sprout, it's a force of life breaking through the earth. The same happens with you. Your breakthrough is often hidden beneath layers of silence, struggle, and preparation. Every delay, every unanswered prayer, every quiet moment is forming you into the man who can handle the harvest when it comes. Remember, God is never idle during your waiting. Even when you feel unseen, he's refining you. Every moment in silence is working for your good. The wilderness you're in isn't wasted time. It's God shaping you, equipping you, and teaching you lessons that success can't teach. Joseph in prison wasn't forgotten. He was being prepared for Pharaoh's palace. Moses in the desert wasn't abandoned. He was being shaped to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And you're not being overlooked. God is waiting for the right time to reveal the next chapter in your story. When the silence ends, it's not just about receiving what you've prayed for, it's about stepping into the strength you've built in the silence. You will emerge stronger, wiser, and more equipped than before. The person you're becoming is the person who can carry the weight of the destiny ahead of you. So, as you wait, trust that God's silence is not absence, it's preparation. And when the breakthrough finally comes, you'll look back and realize that the silence was just the beginning. Drop a comment below. I'm ready for the breakthrough. D.